Hi, welcome back to the Genetic Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lulu, and on this week's episode, Dr. Christy Sutton discusses how genetic testing is the ultimate tool in personalized health and important health choices. Dr. Sutton has studied exclusively to help her create a personalized health plan for each patient. She spends time getting to know her patients and works to help uncover and correct the underlying causes of health problems and prevent future health problems. In order to help her patients, Dr. Sutton spends time with new patients doing a thorough examination to evaluate the musculoskeletal system and nervous system. She will also spend time analyzing lab work and genetic information to make sure that she's looking at all dimensions of her patient's health. Dr. Sutton's expertise is improving one's health and symptoms without drugs or surgery. She believes that everyone deserves and needs a personalized healthcare plan to optimize their health. Dr. Sutton's personal struggles with Crohn's disease and previous work experience as an endoscopy technician have given her an understanding of and empathy for anyone experiencing difficult, painful, and chronic health problems. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Genetic Genius Podcast. I'm so thrilled today to have my guest, Dr. Christy Sutton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yay, you're welcome. So before we dive deep into genetics, which is, of course, is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and you too, first, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, kind of like your background, so we can get to know you a little bit better, that would be great.
Sure. I'm a chiropractor by trade, and I actually got exposed to that profession due to being really sick with Crohn's disease, ironically. It was a chiropractor who helped me more than anybody because I had so many nutritional deficiencies and food allergies that were really triggering my autoimmune disease. And traditional allopathic medicine, that's not really their strong suits traditionally. It really exposed me to that that more holistic path with the chiropractor. And the person who helped me is much like myself in that they do adjustments and stuff, but they also treat the whole body and look at the whole body and look at how it's not just structural, but it's chemical and emotional, and the whole that got me into being interested in holistic healthcare and really understanding more so that it was about my environment as much as it was about me, because leading up to finding that chiropractor that helped me so much, just with some simple nutritional interventions, I thought of myself as being broken. And once I realized, oh my gosh, these simple nutrients that he gave me, like he gave me a high dose of vitamin B3, and that stopped my diarrhea because I had pellagra. So I was walking around as a 20-year-old in America in year 2000 with pellagra. And it wasn't for a lack of medical care. I had great medical care, quote unquote. My father's a medical doctor and a pharmacist. My mom's a pharmacist, but I was still somehow walking around with this nutritional deficiency that we think of as being a third world problem. And it nearly took me out. I weighed about 70 pounds at age 20.
Wow.
Had to basically go to college. So when I started taking that vitamin B3, and the doctor who I was seeing, the chiropractor, explained to me, you have pellagra due to having malabsorption issues. And then as soon as I started taking it, that diarrhea stopped. So that was like a light bulb moment for me, where I was like, oh, I'm not the broken one. It's just my body has not been in the right environment. And I clearly require a very particular environment, much more particular than most people, probably just as particular as a lot of people with autoimmune diseases.
Right.
It's just a lot of people with autoimmune diseases don't really fully understand how much their environment is playing a role in their disease, how much they can control it. And I haven't had to be on serious biological immune suppressant Crohn's medications up until this point in my life. And probably the closest I ever got to going down that road was, interestingly enough, after the first time I got sick, as we were coming out of that pandemic lockdown time, because normally I would get sick and exposed to stuff like just regularly, especially with a kid in the house. It's bringing everything in. And then they're not allowed to get sick because they have plexiglass everywhere and not allowed to intermingle like they should, even if you're trying to let them intermingle. And so it was a good long, probably year and a half where I didn't really get sick like a lot of people. And then I got sick and I had this massive immune reaction that went down very quickly, but simultaneously, the next day after having this 104 spike and then go back down, we traveled and I went somewhere where I got into some gluten, which is a trigger for me, environmental trigger. And so it was like the bang that caused this awful Crohn's flare up. And I think it was probably really my immune system not getting exposed to stuff. I think that was probably it, really. I have no way of proving that. But look at what's happening right now with these little kids that are having liver transplants and in some cases even dying from liver hepatitis because they were not exposed to a couple simple adenoviruses when they were in the first year of their life. And so this is basically an autoimmune disease that's causing this liver problem in them. And they've identified even like the gene, and it's a gene that's associated with autoimmune hepatitis. It just hasn't presented like this in infants before.
Exactly.
A 1-year-old having a liver transplant is unheard of. So I think during the pandemic, we have given birth to the autoimmune generation, basically, which I know I'm not trying to take us off topic too much, but somehow I led us here, and forgive me if that was.
No, it's all good. The show's free flow in that way. Whatever's meant to be brought in, we'll get to.
Yeah. But that's where it ties in everything. Of course, we have these genetic predispositions. Like I obviously have genetic predispositions for an autoimmune disease, just like most of these kids that develop this autoimmune hepatitis have the gene for the autoimmune hepatitis. I have the celiac gene. I cannot be exposed to gluten. My 4-year-old daughter inherited that gene. She has problems with gluten. Sorry, my 8-year-old daughter, she started having problems at 4. There's clearly these genes, and it's just about figuring out what environment your body lives best in. And the environment we live in is so toxic and incongruent with health and how I think we really evolved to live, that we're just going to see it more and more health problems if we don't really become educated and aware and identify our genetic Achilles heel and get like a precision plan for that.
Yeah, that's really important to have that prevention piece, which is why I think that genetics are the wave of the future. It helps us to have the knowledge, the empowerment piece, the blueprint about our future, and not from and we're going to dive into that a little bit more. And I love your story. Thank you so much for sharing, because it really helps people to relate, because people that are listening, they're having some of those things, those same health things going on, especially a lot of autoimmune patients tuning in right now, like really hearing it's a hard place to be. And sometimes you feel lost, what to do, how do I get better? Those things as your body's in this kind of like limiting beliefs place that you can't get better. And so it's great to have that perspective and real life story. So let's dive in and talk about DNA a little bit deeper. But I'd love for us to just talk about at the beginning about DNA and testing, because these are questions I think all the time, all over the board. People are like, well, what's the testing like? How do I know if my data will be secure and private? I'd love for you to just give some of those basics to put us into a platform, a really great, safe place full of knowledge.
Okay, yeah. The companies I have the most experience with are 23andMe, and then Systemic Formulas has a DNA test, which I collaborated with them making it, but in a minimal fashion, but I do have some experience with theirs. Now, 23andMe is the most common one that I use because it's been on the market the longest. It's probably the most popular. So if I have a patient come in, occasionally they already have done 23andMe. I don't even have to talk to them about it. And that's, oh, great. Let's just look at that and figure out today. Let's not wait 6 weeks. So basically that's 23andMe is where I started. And that's largely because that was the easiest, most direct to consumer one. And they've evolved some, and some of that evolution is not to my liking. Some of it I think is good, and there's a lot of, I think, value in that. Now, the question that you asked, which is really good, is about the privacy. And so that's a hard one. And I don't work for 23andMe. I don't have any inside information on what they're doing with information, but I can tell you that whenever somebody asks me and they're concerned about that, which I get, one thing that sometimes we talk about is sometimes people will use a nickname for their account. So it's not actually linking up to their name. And that's the route that I've taken with my family. Of course, I didn't do that for myself because I wasn't smart enough to do it. But when it came time to do it for my other family members, I did. And that's one option. Now, having said that, they still have your DNA. And I personally believe that, and this, I don't know if this is going to give you warm, fuzzy feelings, but I personally believe that we live in a time where privacy is a bit of an illusion. I think that basically, if somebody really wants your information, then good luck trying to keep it private. Try to, but good luck. And when it comes down to the value that genetic testing offers versus the risk, especially if you use like a nickname or something, then I believe it's well worth it. And that for a couple $100, even if you only master like really understanding a couple significant genes that affect you, which I think is ultimately what it comes down to for most people that I look at.
Because there's so many genes. You can't let them all come into your mind and try to figure out how to work with them. I think that's a really good point. Having those key ones, like, okay, these are, maybe it's a vitamin D or MTHFR, those really key ones that you're really like, let's focus on these. And then it can be so overwhelming for patients too, that, which is why it's so important to work with someone like yourself and myself, because that just that data report is overwhelming. And then just going through and figuring out the things that are really in most alignment for what the patient has going on in the moment, because we're all shifting all the time. Yes. It's like, okay, you're having some symptoms of an autoimmune disease, or you have one. Let's look at those specific genes that are related to that. How can we help your body in the best place of wellness with that information? Then maybe that clears through, and then we can look at some other pieces, right? Because otherwise, so much reports, it can be a lot for patients.
I think it's a lot for doctors, honestly.
Right.
And I have to confess, I created a report that has a lot of genes on it. And I created a book that has a lot of genes on it. But you have to understand that that was like the infancy of, I wrote that book and created the report. So the book I'm referring to is the Genetic Testing, Defining Your Path to a Personalized Health Plan. And that has a lot of genes in it. And it goes into what those genes mean and whatnot, and what you can do about them, epigenetics, labs, nutrition, etc. And then what goes along with that report is the genetic detoxification report goes along with the book. And I always run the genetic detoxification report on my patients that have done 23andMe, because there's things in there that I want to look at that I haven't gotten from 23andMe. Having said that, and I have, I think, really grown as a practitioner, because the process of not just writing the book, creating the report, but also really working with people now for years, using this, looking at their symptoms, their history, their family history, their personal history, their labs, their genes, looking at all of that, I have consolidated it down, and that it's at least something that I feel like really makes sense and I can manage. And maybe I'm missing something there. I probably am, because that's just the nature of the game. But at least I think it's still making a meaningful impact. And that's where the next step is, I'm going to create a educational platform called Labogenomics, where I'm going to really teach that consolidated, like, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know all the genes, but you have to know a lot about these ones. Right. These are the key ones. And if you know them inside and out, you're going to help a lot of people need help and that nobody else can help. And so that's where I think that it's heading, right? At least where I hope it's heading.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, the key ones. And also when it comes to the genetic information, when we're having that, we have that report coming in, and it's really good to have a place of knowledge coming in along with a genetic report in a way that's not overwhelming, like we're stating, right? To have that information, and how you said filtering. And also, I think the other really important piece is we're moving at a really fast pace on the planet, right? So that when the 23andMe first came around, like you said, it's an older company. And so now we have lots of other companies that are doing testing and analyzing. And the way we're looking at genetics is changing so fast. So as genetic practitioners like ourselves, we have to really keep up with it. Okay, what's going on? What's the change? And I think that's one of the reasons that it's so important to have these conversations, is that we're seeing such big shifts, right? Okay, this was people like, oh, I'm just going to have my DNA done. It's going to tell me this. But actually, this is the information that we are using. And I think that's an important place for people listening to understand.
And I think definitely anybody that's really dug into this, at some point in time, they just are like, why I'm hitting my head against a wall now. It's just too much information. And I remember when I published my book, I was like, it's never going to be perfect. This is a rapidly changing topic. I just have to get this out there and then move on.
Exactly. You got to get a brain dump.
Yeah.
Boing. Yeah.
And there's some like real jewels in that book, I think. And then there's some real, I just need to probably edit that out at some point in time.
Yeah, you
And
can always
that's, I
rewrite
think, just
it.
the
The second
nature.
edition.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just, I think that's the nature of this topic. And that's where maybe it's not always that you need to be at like the edge of the forefront. Maybe there's some value in kind of having perspective of a little bit of time and
Right.
kind of
Yeah. The middle
clinical
ground.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
What if,
sometimes I hear people say things, and that, for example, when COVID like first started, very beginning, when it was everybody was talking about COVID and COVID this and COVID that, and we didn't even have a really good way to test for COVID, but
right.
people were coming out saying they had a whole COVID genome panel on their genetic report, and these are the genes that matter for COVID. And it's like, how do you know that? You can't even identify who has COVID at this point in time, much less say these are the genes for COVID. And so my point with that is that oftentimes I hear people saying things that I think there's not really good research behind it. And I think that just adds to the confusion. And I really try not to do that. I really try to go based on, because there's so much good information out there that's solid, that needs to get out to the public about genes and what they mean and what you can do about them with your environment, and how you don't have to be at mercy of them. But if you don't know about them, then you might unintentionally become a victim of your ignorance. And so I just really want to become more of a platform for people to feel like, okay, this is sound, this makes sense. She's not trying to overcomplicate it, because, I don't feel the need to draw a million chemical pathways. I can do that, but I don't think that really is going to help you get better results.
Right. Yeah.
And
it has to be simplified in some way.
And what's funny is when I first started this process with patients, I would sit down with them and I'd go over so much with them, and I'd even go through the pathways with them, and just their faces would glaze over.
Totally.
And I was like, I've lost them. And I gave them so much information that they didn't even know like where to start, and they felt overwhelmed. And I really try not to do that anymore, although sometimes it's hard not to. Some things just are overwhelming. Like, it's overwhelming for most people to hear they inherited the Alzheimer's gene or something significant like that. And at that point in time, you just have to talk them through the pieces. And that's where I usually pull out my book and I go to the page that says how to prevent Alzheimer's disease. And I just go line by line and talk them through it. And we spend a lot of time on that one gene. And maybe that's the only gene we talk about. depending on the person.
Right.
But it's just no longer do I sit there and try to go through the whole report. I almost don't even want to like show them the whole report. I just want them to like hear what I say.
Yeah, I think an easy roadmap, and that's a great explanation. And I think that brings up a good point too about people being afraid of testing because of those genes. They think, if I have this particular gene, like you're just mentioned with the Alzheimer's gene or a cancer gene, but they think that if I get my DNA testing done, boom, that means I'm going to get this particular thing. And they're afraid. So I'd love for you to talk about that, like that super myth about fear. Okay, our genetics are, when we do a DNA test, is that our blueprint for our faith? No, or yes.
Yeah, I think the tagline is DNA is not your desk.
Exactly.
Or the other tagline is genetics load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. And
Exactly.
I think that those are good summaries as far as what you're saying. And I do hear that a lot. And often I'll hear people, one of the reasons they're concerned about go digging into this is they're like, I just don't want to know. And my response is often figure it out now when you can do something about it, or figure it out later when you can't. But either way, your genes are not going to change based on your feelings about them. So if you can learn about them and be empowered by the knowledge of what you find out. And then the other key thing is knowing what you have to have a good, I want to say genetic counselor, but I don't want to say genetic counselor because I'm not a genetic counselor. I would never call myself that. But you have to have a good clinician that can sit there and walk you through. Yeah, you have to have a good clinician that can walk you through interpreting why this is important, what does it mean, and most importantly, what to do about it. And that answer is largely different for everybody. That's why I have to, if I really want to dig into somebody's health and give them like a personalized plan and give them the diet that would be best for them and the nutrition supplements would be best for them and the exercise and whatnot, then I don't just need their genes. I really need their labs too, the laboratomics. I need them to combine. I need to know, okay, not only do you have this Alzheimer's gene, which increases your risk for Alzheimer's, but also I need to know, do you have high cholesterol too, which Alzheimer's gene can also increase high cholesterol. Do you have high inflammation? Because inflammation is going to accelerate Alzheimer's. Do you have high iron? Maybe you have the hemochromatosis gene too. A particular genetic combination is really bad, which is something that I discuss in the book that I have coming out, The Iron Curse. That's something that the laboratomics that I'm going to be teaching is going to talk a lot about too. It's really layering, creating the layers. Do you have high blood sugar? Because if you have high blood sugar, then plus Alzheimer's gene, then, you know, good luck. We got to get that down, or else you're really on a fast train to Alzheimer's disease. So there's so much people can do. And in the number one thing, when I go through that list, the list in my genetic testing, defining your path to a personalized health plan book, the number one thing on that page, how to prevent Alzheimer's disease, is exercise. Exercise reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease
That's right.
by 50%.
Yeah, blood circulation. We got to get blood to the brain. Hello.
Yeah, blood circulation, get more BDNF, just exercise. That alone will reduce your risk by 50%. And then from there on out, let's just keep on accumulating. Let's stack the deck in your favor. But the risk, your ability to prevent a disease decreases with age. That's an unfortunate reality. So if you have a gene when you're a child and you have an educated parent that knows how to give you the right environment, they can actually start making a meaningful impact at a young age. And I want to give an example for ApoE4, the Alzheimer's gene. I think this is really important. This is something I'm excited to teach about. And it's basically that the ApoE4 gene causes leaky blood. It causes a leaky blood-brain barrier after you get a concussion. So let me back up. Everybody that gets a traumatic brain injury, a concussion, they all get leaky blood-brain. They always get leaky brain. Yeah, the leaky blood-brain barrier. However, people with that ApoE4 gene, they do not heal up. Their blood-brain barrier doesn't heal up as well as somebody without that. That is a genetic reality for them. And that's not to say that you can't, there's definitely things you can do to, if you have the ApoE4 gene, to make sure that you heal up your blood-brain barrier as well as possible, and to the same extent as somebody without that gene. And you could not have that Alzheimer's gene and get a worse concussion off the same impact, because your brain is you're just in that bad of health. It's not just the gene. But the reality is that gene it sets you up for not healing up from a traumatic brain injury, concussion as well. And then you're going to have this delayed, prolonged, potentially indefinite head injury. So when I talk about the value of getting genetic testing done when you're a child versus an adult, when I see children with that Alzheimer's gene, I talk to their parents about, what sports are you going to put this kid in? Because football is soccer, hockey, whatever, head injury sport is not the best choice. Gear them towards golf, tennis, swimming, diving. I don't care, but let's try to not put them in a head injury sport. And if you choose to do that, then let's at least sit down and talk about what you can do before the concussion and after the concussion to minimize it and then heal it up faster.
Yeah, I think those are great points too. And I like how you brought up the testing of children. And I think that's a really important place to be from the parent, especially like you were even mentioning with your daughter, really having that knowledge within ourselves and then being able to empower our children in an educational way. It's all about education. That's the huge aspect of genetic testing, I think, is, okay, let's test and see if you have like the MTHFR gene. So if you as a parent, both parents even have that, is a really important reason to test your children. I mean, there's lots of other genes that have that same important piece. And I wanted to go back to another thing that you brought up, but you didn't say the word about epigenetics, and why. Let's talk about that piece too. Is that's really what's the environment, right? That piece, you could talk about how that's really affecting our genes, and that's really everything, right? And so we have the genetic, genetic blueprint, but what's epigenetics about, and how is that impacting our genetic code?
Yeah, and there's very few genes that just lock you into a specific disease. There are some. If you inherit 2 PKU genes, then you're going to have PKU. You can still change your environment to improve your health, but there's very few genes that really lock you into a serious disease. What most of us deal with is we deal with inheriting a set of genes that increases our risk for certain problems, or maybe decreases our risk for certain problems. And then the ultimate kind of switch, what determines if we transgress all the way to the point where we develop a disease, is our environment. For example, you could have the gene for diabetes, but you could exercise, eat well, and take care of your health and never develop diabetes.
Right. Yes.
And with cancers and Alzheimer's disease and most of these diseases that we deal with, it's their environment. And even if you look at, I mentioned celiac because I have that gene, and I think that's an important one that we all need to know if we have, because it affects so many people in so many different ways that often get misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all.
Yeah.
And it's an easy thing. If I see that gene, then I always want to talk to somebody about it, because chances are pretty good that either they have a problem and they're not aware of it because they are thinking of it as a digestive problem only, or maybe they're just not tuned into my digestive problem as a gluten problem, or maybe they have a parent or a child that has this issue that they can help them diagnose, which is the beauty of going into genes. I can't just help you. You can carry the torch to this next person. Maybe you can make this domino effect, which is really beautiful. But especially if you start looking down the generations, it's kind of like the Pottinger's cats. Let's make each generation. Are you familiar with the Pottinger's cats?
No, I don't know that.
Okay. So the Pottinger's cats, and forgive me if I mess up this story. I think they're Pottinger's cats. I think I might be messing this up. Will you edit this out if I mess this up?
Yes, I will.
Okay, there were these cats where like the guy, basically the scientist, he was breeding these cats, and the first generation mothers were malnourished. They were not given taurine. And then, which cats really need taurine, the amino acid. And then the generation that was born from those mothers was like extremely unhealthy. But each generation after that was like more and more unhealthy. And then when they finally added back in the taurine, it took multiple generations for them to get better. And so, where if I kind of overlay that with what I was talking about, I think if I personally had a lot of health problems and have many that I'm managing, my goal is to make my daughter healthier. And I was really anal retentive about my pregnancy, and I'm anal retentive about her life, her health, and I watch it very closely. And I don't think anal retentive is the right word. I would say I'm very aware, because I want for her to really I want her not to have to deal with what I've had to deal with. And I want for her to have even healthier kids, so that hopefully we can break this cycle. That's my hope. That's my prayer. The reality is, and this kind of makes me sad, is maybe they'll just be able to survive in an increasingly toxic world that a lot of other people get weeded out from. Is my concern, because our environment in so many ways is becoming so toxic, and our clinical ability to identify that and correct it is pretty bad. Side of the kind of holistic healthcare field, which is fully embracing this problem and taking it on, but it's not something that insurance companies are paying for. If you want to find out if you have high mercury, it's going to be on your own dime, probably. And if you want to pay to get those mercury fillings taken out, well, you better save up, because the American Dental Association is even going to admit that it's a problem, much less pay for it. I'm not sure how I got talking about that, but
yes. No worries there. So we were talking about about epigenetics and how things in our environment affect us. Then we got into the story about the cats and how that our gene. Yes. Sometimes we got to circle back. We got to recharge the brain. It gets off on our little tangents.
Yes. So epigenetics is everything. That's the whole thing. It's all about keeping things in range. So you talked about MTHFR. Yeah. So if you have inherited this gene, MTHFR, where your enzyme, MTHFR enzyme, doesn't work as well as it doesn't like methylate, it doesn't add that carbon group as well as it should, then you're going to have various health problems that accumulate, because that enzyme just isn't working as well because you inherited this gene. But then if you give your body what it needs to make that enzyme work better, and then maybe even give your body what it needs to have a workaround for the inefficiencies of the enzyme, then that's the ticket. You can bypass all those columns and lists of health problems that are related to MTHFR, from infertility to schizophrenia. It's all there. And that is one section in my book worth reading, is the MTHFR section. It really goes into these are the potential health problems. And another thing that it talks about that I think maybe doesn't get as much airtime as it deserves is the MTHFR enzyme needs vitamin B2 to work.
Exactly.
So if you're low in vitamin B2, then you could have perfect MTHFR genes and still have an inefficient MTHFR enzyme, which is going to create the same health problems that you would have with the MTHFR gene genetic problem. So just because you have perfect genes doesn't mean you got a ticket, which nobody does, but let's face it, some people have better genes than others. There's this genetic lottery. It's life isn't fair as much as we want it to be. Some people just won the genetic lottery and most of us lost. But we change our environment to the extent that we can keep up with them, and they have such bad environments sometimes that they fall back behind, and it's really at that point in time survival of the fittest, and the smarter you are, the fitter you are. But back to the MTHFR thing, that if you're low in B2, your MTHFR enzyme's not going to work as well, the same as it wouldn't work if you had that gene. Whereas if you have that genetic problem and you add that B2, it's going to help to accommodate that enzyme and make it work much better than it would. And then if you give your body the extra methylfolate, then you're going to be getting that end product regardless of your body's ability to manufacture it.
Yeah, so important.
But that's another reason why you really got to understand it and know what it means. Because if I see somebody just taking a methylfolate, I'm like, I'm glad you're taking that, because there's so many worse things you could be taking, and there's so many benefits to that. I think we can do it a little bit better. I want to give you everything that you need to make that methylation cycle work.
Right. The whole pathway.
Yeah. I don't want to just jam one thing and then create a backlog somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's important. And then that's the other piece we were talking about, having that clinical perspective when it comes to genetic testing, right? Because that's the piece that someone could be, oh yeah, I have this particular gene. I'm just going to Google it, right? And see what Google says, which is not something you want to do out there if you're listening. Googling for your health is not what you want to do. I'm just giving an example. But yeah, so I think that piece is so important, because there's a lot of different pieces in the physiological pathway when it comes to our genetics. Because our body is, complicated but beautiful. We're seeing all the different pieces come to play. And when from that clinical perspective, we can see, oh, you have this particular gene. Let's see all the other pieces. And I think that's the major kind of theme we're talking about today. It's not just one piece that turns on or turns off that particular gene. It's much larger perspective. We want to see all, like how, like you mentioned with the labs, how your body is functioning, how the blood pressure, how the blood sugar, like all of it together, because that creates the holistic model. Genetics are just a picture. We're just seeing like the inside picture, but we want to see the holistic piece, the emotional piece, like the stress component from the epigenetics, like how are you handling stress? Now let's look at your genes and see how that is having that web interacting within your system. And I think that's really a great point that you brought up there. We want to be able to see the whole picture and tweak it. Oh, let's tweak this, see how you feel. Let's tweak this over here and see how you feel. Oh, let's do this with your nutrition. Let's do this with your exercise, because there's so many different components that can really, it's all about optimal health, right? Individualized optimal health. And I love that piece. And let's talk about the book, and you're kind of like, you talked a little bit about the genetic detoxification piece. And I'd love for you to talk, like, what does that mean exactly? Are we detoxing all the genes from our system? How is it individualized for each person? Which I think you've talked a little bit about, but if you could go into a little bit more detail, I would love that.
Yes. Okay. So the genetic detoxification report, which is at geneticdetoxification.com, you use 23andMe data to create this report that gives you extra information. And then some of the same information that 23andMe gives you, but it gives you like your exact genotype, rather than with 23andMe, often it'll say like somewhat risk, slight risk.
Slight risk. And you're like, wait, what does that mean?
Which by the way, just ignore what they say. If anything on that report says there is any risk at all, you have a risk, and it's a serious risk. That's what I've discovered from their reports. I don't know why they compute those risks, but they definitely do.
It's probably something they're liable for. They're probably that piece.
It's a lawyer.
Yeah,
I think it could be. All roads lead to lawyers.
Yeah, something about liability, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but they're not doctors.
Yeah. Right? So, like, for example, the hemochromatosis gene, it'll often say variant detected, not at an increased risk. The average person, they're going to read that and say, oh, cool, I'm good. Okay, that's the same person that might be walking around with high iron destroying their health for the last 10 years undiagnosed. That's a real thing that I see a lot. Ignore what the risks are. The nice thing about the genetic detoxification report is that it gives you like the exact genotype for everything. It's very transparent. That's one thing I do not like about a lot of reports out there, is that they don't. And that's my biggest beef right now with 23andMe. They're giving out all these health reports, but they're not giving the genes. And I'm like, what is the gene? I don't care what your calculations are, because your calculations suck. What I care about is what is the gene, so I can go and research it. And they give genes in some cases, but they really don't give genes on a lot of these new reports. And it's very frustrating because you have to actually know the genotype.
That's
And
right.
there's a lot of reports out there that they don't give you the genotype, and they're automatically, I think it decreases their credibility, because what clinician is going to look at a report and say, okay, yeah, I know what this means? No, it doesn't mean anything until you know what you're actually dealing with. That's like somebody giving me a lab report that says cholesterol high.
And that's
Okay,
it.
what's the number?
Right.
What's the number? What's
what
the
are all the other
breakdown? Is
keys?
it LDL or HDL? Give
Right.
me the data.
Right.
It's all about data, and it's about understanding the data and seeing through what everybody else is missing and where the misinformation is. So we give genetic detoxification transparent, gives you all the information, and every single gene that is in that report I either discuss in great detail in my book, Genetic Testing, Defining Your Path to a Personalized Health Plan, or at the very end of the report, I actually added some more genes, but I was not in the headspace to go back and rewrite the book. So I created at the end of the report, like a chart that says, what does this gene mean? So that, for example, there's a lot of new hypertension and cardiovascular genes at the end of the report. And so it'll say, what exactly is the risk with this gene? What does it mean? And even in some cases, like what medications or therapies have been shown to be really beneficial for this specific gene or whatever.
Yeah, that's an important piece.
And I always try to take the approach of course, first do no harm, but I want things to be done as side effect free as possible, as natural as possible. In my book, I really try to focus on what you can do naturally: diet, supplement, exercise, etc.
Exactly.
But the reality is that there's a lot of medications out there that people are taking, and you want to know if you have a bad reaction to that medication genetically, or if you're going to have a good reaction. And there's a lot of people walking around with resistant hypertension that like won't come down, and it's because they have a gene where they don't metabolize aldosterone. Like their aldosterone just keeps building up. Right. So they just keep pumping up, they just keep absorbing sodium, and their blood pressure goes up. And they do really well on this hypertensive medicine, spironolactone. And I think that's worth knowing. I always try to get people's blood pressure down with diet, exercise, nitric oxide, which nitric oxide genes are also in that report. So it's just, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes I'll look at people's genes and I'm like, not that helpful, but there's a couple things here and there. And there's other times where it's, whoa, this is going to change your life, and it's going to change your whole family's life. And so that's fun. As far as what does the genetic detoxification mean? On that genetic detoxification report, there's a lot of detox genes. Phase 1 detox, phase 2 detox, actually break phase 2 detox into glutathione, methylation, glucuronidation, sulfation, acetylation. I have the PON1 gene on that detox part, a lot of other detox genes. And then, but it's not just detoxification.
Just right. It's not just detoxification.
Yeah, that was maybe a little bit of a misnomer. You buy the domain names that are out there, not the ones that you want. So genetic detoxification was available at the time, and I liked the name enough to run with it. But it's not just about detoxification. It's also about brain health and cardiovascular health and nutrient metabolism and malabsorption and digestive health and autoimmune diseases and inflammation. And it really is more whole health encompassing. Having said that, there's a lot on there, and I think it's worth everybody going and learning about those things by having the book that I wrote with it. But because maybe they'll see something that is extremely valuable that I'm just not really there, because that's just not where my headspace and my patients are. So right. I'm not saying to discredit it, but when as I told you, I'm going to start this laboratogenomics, which is really marrying the lab testing, my experience with genetics, and trying to narrow down just the big major ones, so that I think if we can just get the clinicians out there to understand that, like really get these big major ones, we can just like totally change healthcare.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Genetics is definitely the wave of the future. And I liked how you really talked about the aspects of genetics in regards to the phases of detoxification. And that's a huge piece what I always look at when with the genetic reports, because I want to see how their body detoxes, especially from the women's health perspective. How is your body detoxing? As women, we need, especially when we're into the phase where we're not cycling anymore, we need to know how we're detoxifying, because we have to get those things out of the system. It's part of our natural DNA, right? We want that body to be detoxing, releasing, cleansing every month. So when we switch into that phase where we're not cycling anymore, we can have a lot more buildup, and that detoxification is so key, so important. So I really like that you have that in your report, and that you're expanding it, right? Is that holistic piece where detoxification is, I think, one of the most important things our body does, but there's a lot of other pieces, because we have the different aspects, like you mentioned, with our health, the cardiovascular, et cetera, which then play that role. And so with your new book, The Iron Curse, in regards to hemochromatosis, what specific pieces, what's a little bit different about that book? Can you give us a kind of like a background behind it, or what's that, or maybe like the promo, because it isn't out yet?
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. Okay, so let me take a sip of water here. Okay. Not too long after I married my husband, about 10 years ago, I moved to Dallas, and he went to the doctor and he left his blood work on the kitchen table. And I looked at it and I said, you have high liver enzymes and high ferritin, or it wasn't high out of range, but it was high in my lab range, and high hemoglobin and hematocrit. And your iron's too high, and it's messing up your liver. And why is your doctor not talking to you about this?
Why are they not doing anything?
And they're not doing anything. They're not even mentioning it to you.
So many patients like that.
Turns out this isn't the first time his labs have been out of range. That turns out they've been out of range before.
Wow.
And so I get him to go donate blood. And I'm still learning about, this was in the infancy of me really digging into genetics. And not too long after this all initiated, that's when I started writing what became my book and really digging in, and came along the hemochromatosis gene. And of course, at this point in time, I've tested my husband and myself for our genes, and he has the hemochromatosis gene. I study it and I understand it. I thought I understood it. I understood it more than most people, but it wasn't until I wrote this next book that I realized it's not until you write a book about something that you learn how much you don't know about something that you thought you knew about. And then you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know anything about it, but now I do. So anyways, my husband, he doesn't donate blood like he should, because he's not getting a lot of encouragement from his doctor. And I'm just his wife, and he loves me, but he doesn't particularly love my medical advice, and get a lot of resistance. And so finally it's like, okay, you've got to figure out why your liver enzymes are high. And I think it's because you have high iron, and I'm ordering all these extra lab tests on you that fit into my scenario, like my theory. And so then, okay, he's going to go to a gastroenterologist. So he goes to a gastroenterologist for the liver enzymes, and I present everything. I present the lab work and the genes, and I say, I think his high iron is causing him to have liver enzyme elevated. And the gastroenterologist, he listens to me, and then I think he probably dismisses me. And I think that because he then just goes through all of these extra liver tests that take us on this rabbit hole, and then misdiagnose him with autoimmune hepatitis, and waste a bunch of time with that, and wasted about 6 months. It would have been longer if I hadn't done extra labs on my own to prove to him that this was a misdiagnosis. And then once he realized that, and they'd done all the ultrasound and everything, I think you probably need to see a hematologist because you have polycythemia vera, and which was the wrong diagnosis, but the right referral, hematosis, which he did have. And then he said, your liver enzymes are just mildly elevated. They're really not that, it's really not that big of a deal, because I thought they were really high, and they were going up, but we're more like in the 50s to 80s range. Yeah. And creeping up, not going in the right direction. And so he said, fatty liver, lose 20 pounds. And so we go to the hematologist, and I give the hematologist the blood work, which at this point in time is the iron's just getting higher, because we just wasted all this time with autoimmune hepatitis. And now I 10 seconds into showing him the blood work, he's like, he says, hemochromatosis. Okay, great. It's pretty easy. High iron, hemochromatosis. We know the genes, we have the labs. So they remove the blood, get his hemochromatosis under control, get his iron levels down. His liver enzymes start to improve, although that takes much longer than we anticipate to completely resolve. And then because like you, I'm really looking at the whole body and really looking deep into one's health. I also, when I ordered these labs, I ordered the DHEA adrenal hormones, and my husband's had a history of like occasionally his DHEA and his cortisol would bump up and go back down. It was always something that would go back down to normal. It was slightly high and go back to normal. And of course, I attribute it to a very high stress job. And so anyways, we go to the endocrinologist and I give her all the labs. Because honestly, I thought once we get this hemochromatosis taken care of, everything's going to go back to normal. Everything's going to get better. I was like, this is it. This is what we're going to do. And so we were waiting for that to get better. It didn't get better. So we go to the endocrinologist and I give everything. And I'm like, and I'm worried he might have Cushing's disease because he had these little striae on his side he got in college.
Interesting.
But he said that they were just stretch marks from gaining weight and then losing it. So anyways, she said, no, he doesn't have Cushing's. He doesn't look like somebody with Cushing's. Right. Labs don't look like somebody with Cushing's. He doesn't have diabetes. So then about 6 months later, he's having brain surgery to have a pituitary tumor removed because he has Cushing's disease, because he has a pituitary tumor that's secreting ACTH, which is causing him to have cortisol. That's why he couldn't lose weight. That's why he lose 20 pounds, fatty liver. My husband didn't need to lose 20 pounds because of fatty liver. He had Cushing's disease, which was causing him to have extra weight. That was being misdiagnosed as fatty liver. And that's where it would have ended for a lot of people. Like they wouldn't have figured out they had hemochromatosis and a pituitary tumor causing mild Cushing's. And turns out, and this was like a big aha moment, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I'm going to admit it because I'm shameless like that. But I didn't know how bad the high iron is for the pituitary gland. Like I didn't know until I was writing this book that high iron is like extremely bad for the anterior pituitary gland, which is where my husband's tumor grew.
So interesting. That's the whole, and who knows how long that high iron was happening in his system, probably for a very long time.
I think it's been going on since high school. I think it's been going on since high school.
Yeah.
And I meet kids with high iron all the time.
Yeah.
Because they have these genes. And it never gets diagnosed because who's looking for high iron? Who's even doing thorough lab tests on a kid if it's not like extra holistic doctor? Every pediatrician that I know, good or bad, like they're not getting super thorough lab tests on their
very basic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, especially as like we were talking earlier with menstruating teens, very important to know how their body's processing iron. And if they're iron deficient, there's so many, I see that a lot with the teenage population as well. Your new book sounds amazing. And I love that background story. I hope you put that in there. If you haven't yet, you definitely need to put that in there.
No, I did.
Okay, good.
And it's a really I'm excited about it. It's a really important topic. Maybe I can twist your arm and you'll let me back on when
that's right. Yes. Yeah. You have to let us know for sure. And so as we're wrapping up today, Dr. Sutton, it was been so great to have you on. Tell us about how people can find you, and you have some amazing free content on your YouTube channel, how people can get your book, all of that great stuff, following you all around the world.
Okay, thank you. I'm, of course, on Instagram, although I was very resistant for a very long time, but I'm there, Dr. Christy Sutton. And then I'm on Facebook as Dr. Christy Sutton. And then, of course, I have the Genetic Detoxification website that links to me. And then if you want to come to Dallas or have a virtual appointment, then you can find me at Sutton Chiropractic and Nutrition in Dallas. So
nice.
That's the way to find me. I'm pretty easy to find.
That's great. And then your YouTube channel is just Dr. Christy Sutton. And that's really
Yes.
easy for people to find and for
Mhm.
watch amazing videos on. Well, thank you again so much for coming today. I loved our conversation all
Thank
about genetics
you.
and really
You
about
too.
ways to really elevate your body from a different perspective, which I think like we were talking about, this is just a wave of the future. This is the new health is genetics. And I think that because from that prevention and wellness, we're like, we have the information. Let's use it. Let's really find out how we can be the most optimal person we've ever dreamed of.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. You're very good at this.
Thank you very much. Thanks again.